What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I wanted to do something kind of special for Spider-Man 2, seeing that we're just a few days away from the review scores and then the game itself coming out, and I thought, all right, well, all this talk, potentially, the first review score, first review itself leaked, and they called it not just maybe the best superhero game of all time, but one of the best games of all time. So I thought, well, let's do a video on what you'd even have to do to be the best superhero game. Now, honestly, it's up for debate of what your favorite superhero game is, and that's totally up to you. I do believe if I search deep down, I think Arkham City, probably universally, as well as probably myself, I do believe it to be the best superhero game of all time. It's not my favorite Arkham game. I've talked about that before. Arkham Asylum is actually my personal favorite, but I do think City is the most well-rounded. I think critically, all that kind of stuff. I do think it's oftentimes regarded, and it probably is the best superhero game. However, you don't have to say it's Arkham City. It could be whatever, oddball superhero game you want to. What would Spider-Man 2 have to do to beat that? Now, I put this on Twitter, and some of the responses, some of them were pretty funny in terms of, existing, right? Like, all Spider-Man 2 has to do is just come out, and then automatically it'll be the best game. I think the idea that improvements over the first game, if it improves while keeping it still good, right, that's probably enough. I personally don't think the first Spider-Man game is the best superhero game of all time. Maybe some people do. Some people have oftentimes talked about past Spider-Man games as the best Spider-Man game, the Web of Shadows, etc. Some people think that those are the best Spider-Man games. I think if you do everything the first game did and improve upon it, you probably do land on one of, if not the best superhero games of all time. So what does that mean? Well, I think it's really like smoothing out the edges. So I've talked about it before. A personal thing for me that I am actually getting less and less concerned about. I do think they're going to nail this. The story, but the consistency of the story. Replaying the first game, and I did a whole retrospective video of this on my third channel. I thought it kind of jumped a bit too much, and I didn't really mind like the jumping from Peter to Miles or Peter to MJ and then back. I thought that was okay, but the way they do the Sinister Six and you're doing the Mr. Negative and then immediately jumps to Doc Ock and all this stuff, I think it was just too jumpy personally for me. So I wouldn't say it was the best story of any superhero game. I think, and I've said it before, if they really just focus on Kraven, Venom, you have Wraith, but even if she's like a side thing, I actually think less is more. I actually think if you have less things going on in the story, specifically for Spider-Man, I think Insomniac can handle that a lot better. I think they did a great job with the first game with the story. I thought it was a good story, but I think it just jumped around too much, and I think that's because they were trying to do too much. And I actually get the feeling, now again, I haven't seen the leaks, I haven't seen anything like that, so I don't technically know this, but I get a sense that it is going to be a lot more contained. There's going to be less, you have Lizard and all that stuff, but I think the idea of Kraven and Venom and everything kind of just being right in front of you, I think they're going to nail it. And I'm kind of on that side. I think if you have a more consistent story that hits the high notes of the first game and maybe even goes beyond that, and we've talked about ways that they could do that, right? I think the simple idea of kind of a friendship story with Harry, and if Harry becomes Venom and all that, I think that would actually work extremely well. And, if he dies, I think automatically you kind of hit some highs, just by saying it out loud, right? Obviously, they have to nail it when we watch it or when we're playing it, but I think that would work. And then I guess smoothing out the edges of the rest of the game, there's not that much you have to do. I think crimes being a little bit more consistent and impactful. We've talked about kind of side missions, but I think they're on the up and up with side missions. I think Miles kind of already proved that the big ones, those blue icon ones, right? Like the legitimate side missions. I think Miles proved that they can do them extremely well. They can be meaty. They can kind of be like multi-part. I think they can do it really well. So I'm not really worried about that. The gameplay's already extremely good. Like the thing and the first thing I thought of when I was even asking this question to myself, the tough thing is when you go back in time, hindsight being 2020, right? Like it's easy to judge the past. It's hard to judge when it's kind of happening in the moment. When I think of why I do believe Arkham City is the best one, the jump it made from Asylum was so big, and it's hard to, I think, do that nowadays. And that's something that I guess we're going to have to realize when we play Spider-Man 2. Is it a big jump? I will say this. I mean, as I've been saying, I think the idea of smoothing things out and just being a little bit more consistent probably gets it. But I think that kind of impact of oh my God, this is everything that made the first game special and good, and then they really raised the bar. They really jumped. And I think that's what Arkham City honestly did. I think it did everything that did well in Arkham Asylum, and they took that jump where it's like you couldn't even believe that they were able to do something like that. Like, you didn't think the bar could even be raised that high because the first, in my opinion, the first game was so good, right, in Arkham Asylum. I think a very similar situation could happen here. I think many, like, as I've said, like, the response to my question, even in my small little sample size, some people think Marvel Spider-Man, 2018, that was the best superhero game. So all this game would have to do to take the title away from it is just be slightly better, and do most things the same, and then just add a few things, and then you're already better than it, right? So, I mean, it's subjective, right? Depends on what is your already favorite superhero game. I totally understand that. I think that just being a little bit more consistent, doing that jump, and just having, like I said, those kind of moments where you say, I thought they kind of maxed that out. So it could be the fighting, it could be some of the side stuff, it could be the feel of web swinging, right? Like movement. But it needs to have, I think, a couple moments throughout the game where you say, I thought Insomnia kind of maxed that out, and then they took it to another level right now in front of my eyes. I think if you have that happen just a few times, and again, the consistency, the story consistency, the crimes being a little bit better, the side missions being, I'd say, raised to the bar that Miles had it, maybe a little bit more, but then all of them being like that, right? Consistency across the board with side stuff. And then the rest, I think, will take care of itself. It's hard to go backwards for fighting, like the combat. How would you go backwards there? Web swinging, I think that's only going to improve. It's not going to take a step back. The only thing that could really hurt it, you could argue, would maybe be the talk of like repetitiveness, right? Maybe it's too similar. If it's too similar to 2018, or that's like a thing that we're all kind of saying, right? Like that's kind of like a key word, that might hurt it. Because again, I think the idea with these very, very special games, these one-of-a-kind games, well, it's just that. They are one of a kind. They're not too similar. They're not exactly the same, let's say. Just, adding the sequel, title to it, or the sequel number to it. They're not just that. And that's not what Arkham City was. And I really don't think that's what Spider-Man 2 is going to be either. So let me know, guys, in the comments below. What do you think? What does the game need to do for you to be the best superhero game of all time? Make sure, as always, you guys are subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.